Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Thank you to everyone who is joining us, and there's still a whole lot of people streaming in today. And thank you to some of our local government friends who actually join our other webinars as well. We have been running webinars on all sorts of topics, organisation, for 10 years now. And we've had such a fabulous response to our topics with some great feedback, hopefully today too, and a feedback on how we can improve and some suggestions for additional topics, one of which is this actual webinar. Today, we have a topic specifically, I've tried to tailor it for local government in New South Wales. We are based in New South Wales, when somebody asked about the topic of organisational design in the context of conservative local government, and that's how it was pitched to us, this webinar was born. So all our previous webinars, if you're interested, are on demand, so do reach out if you're interested in any of our other topics. So let's move on with the webinar. Let me introduce myself. I'm Evelyn Muhlenberg, Managing Director of Learning Ventures. I am on Gadigal land. I'm your host today, or your Learning Ventures host. While I am a veteran, I guess, of the consulting sector, I actually really enjoy the webinar process because it gives me an opportunity to drill down into a topic and create a summary or a story. So look, for today, I chatted actually with a number of councils, and whilst we see great innovation in government and in councils in pockets, I think these days it's not necessarily deliberate enough or transforming our councils with enough speed. Learning Ventures, for those of you who don't know us, we're 15 years old this year. And that means that we actually have a great body of work in many types of organisations and in sectors. We are a leadership consulting company that works to develop people and to maximise human value. And we want to be really clear about the fact that even in the age of AI, and we all use technology and AI, we are a consulting organisation that is clearly about developing people and maximising human value organisations, human value. So we want to be the trusted partner in organisational transformation, and we believe that we can actually accelerate transformation for organisations because of our 15 years experience, and I've got miles more experience than that, but also our deep understanding of the systems in organisations as well as the people and the leaders. The three strategic pillars that we live by are on our screen here, and our strategic pillars haven't actually changed over the last 15 years. We like to challenge conventional thinking. We do think that leadership, and even more important these days, it will shape the success of organisations in the future. And we like our projects to deliver results. And we've done a number of evaluation studies, longitudinal evaluation studies of the work that we've done and how it delivers the return on investment. So enough about us. Let's talk about you. Local government has always evolved, but right now the pace and scale of change is really different. So in the research I did for this webinar, I spoke to a number of councils, and they agreed that it's not only AI that's forcing change. It's financial constraints, workforce shortages, changing community expectations, and they're all kind of converging at once. So it appears to be a bit of a perfect storm. So you're not alone. While AI might be the catalyst, there is much to be learned from other organisations that do not necessarily have the same constraints, but who are learning along the way and have some great tips for us. So what we're going to cover in, well, a little less than 45 minutes now, so maybe sort of 35. I'll speak quickly, I always do. Why are we at the crossroads now? How leadership, capability and organisational design can impact councils. And it means it's about what really doing more with less means to the people on the ground. And I've got 5 tips at the end. So let me ask you for your input here. Why do you think councils are at the crossroads now? And that was the title of this webinar. So I'm really interested in what kind of piqued your interest or why you think councils are at the crossroads. And I've got couple of points as well. But just load it into the chat if you'd like to make a comment. There's all those issues of the financial constraints, backlogs, insurance, rate pegging, gosh, all of those sorts of things. There's planning and environmental compliance. There's work health and safety. There's all of the legislation that has even increased, not necessarily decreased. I was reading the Safe Work Australia guidelines the other day, and I know that that's dry reading. Let's say it wasn't bedtime reading. I had to really focus. But what they're talking about in some of their guidelines is the psychosocial risks. And the report I was reading suggested that psychosocial risks were now coming to the fore in Fair Work Australia. And look, the one that surprised me the most that is actually taking up a number of the cases that are going through is poor organisational change management, meaning that changes that we make in organisations that are poorly planned, poorly communicated, not necessarily supported, or managed are a work health and safety hazard. And that puts huge pressure on an organisation. Thank you for a couple of the comments that we've got going through. What I also notice is that the age profile of councils, particularly in some of the technical and operational roles, is going up. We actually did speak to a council who had a 50-50 split between a very ageing workforce, which was exiting in the next 5 years, and some of their other workers. So that age profile really makes succession planning difficult. There's talent shortages everywhere in there. And look, I've got changing workforce. All of these things are really, really important. And the other one that's coming in at the moment is residents expecting more. I think we've got that there, but also AI. It's starting to automate report drafting, customer triage, document processing, knowledge retrieval. There's routine analysis. It's changing the work that we know. So these pressures actually combine to create one challenge. And that means that as councils, we need to increase our capability and adaptability without increasing the cost. That's that more for less. And we don't think this is a budgeting or a productivity issue. We think it's a system design issue. And if we change the system design, we might have the freedom to do more with what we've got. So how does organisation design impact councils? Quick poll. Is your knowledge of organisation design? Yes, I'm across all the concepts. I understand it. I've heard of it, or not much. Now, in answering this poll, what you're going to do is give me an idea as to how much information I just need to cover in there, in the thing, because organisation design is actually something that's really critical in terms of learning ventures and what some of the work that we're doing, because it's that shift that's actually delivering the results for people. Well done. So I'm going to end the poll now. I think we've got a few more to respond, but let's end and I will share the results with you. So a lot of you are across the concepts in terms of 50-odd%. You understand it for close to 20%, and there's a few that need to or could understand a bit more. Thank you. With that, as there's over 50% that know a reasonable amount, I'll try and be reasonably quick in how I cover the org design that we do. This is our model for org design, and it's recently come to the fore because people are starting to talk more and more about the skill-based organisation. And there's a couple of points here. Firstly, why is the skill-based organisation actually driving the resurgence in org design? And why is it important now? Now, this is our flow. Org design, as you can see, after strategic goals, is the process of actually designing the system, and it helps the organisation run effectively and efficiently. It aligns the processes, the technology, and the resources all to deliver the strategy. It's often mixed up with strategic workforce planning, which is the analysis of the workforce capability and what resources and capabilities we need to deliver the strategy, not now, but in 5 years' time. In our flow, strategic workforce planning comes after org design, or the design of the whole workflow system that's delivered. Now, I saw a webinar recently, and it suggested that only 15% of organisations are even looking at strategic workforce planning. Most are doing headcount for budget purposes and or succession planning, but they're not really assessing the capability required for the future. It's another critical organisational development initiative and another whole webinar that we actually did last year. But org design is often mixed up with organisation structure, which is part of it. But if you only restructure, you will not reap the benefits of the full org design process, because it can only deliver headcount. It can't necessarily, if you just restructure, it just shifts the people. It usually doesn't change the processes and the technology and the systems that we're in. So in our model, we start with the vision. And as a little bit of background, and this makes org design really clear, is that org design was first coined by Taylor back, 50 odd years ago, or actually more now. And it progressed through when Taylor did production and resources. He actually, it was, enveloped or enhanced or accelerated by Hendrick about 10 years later when he did system thinking. And they were the horrible time and motion studies that were done in the 90s. What they did was that they looked at designing an efficient process, adding the mechanics and some of the rudimentary technology, so it was an efficient process, and then they scientifically trained people to develop and to do the job, which was a part of the process. And this is where the major change is happening in org design, because now we're not necessarily going to have jobs, because a lot of the roles of job that we traditionally have in jobs is going to be automated in some way, and AI is going to supplement. In local government, there are some great examples of flattening structures over the last 5 to 10 years, but these are projects that are well recorded, but they are structural changes in the hierarchy to maybe some clusters under the hierarchy. So by all accounts, they're implemented by some councils, but I wonder, and I'm not 100% sure, if a lot of work redesign and workflow redesign was done, despite the fact that some of the examples I read were done with a great deal of engagement. So these days, org design is not just about the process, but it's how it interlocks with the technology and the people. And with the eventual removal of the repetitive tasks by technology, it will be about the resources that are left, the human value, and the skills that they have. That's the theory. So it's different now, and it's important now because of AI. Local government is at the crossroads, I think, probably because the system needs a great deal of redesign. And the only way we're going to achieve our strategy is to transform and change the system using technology. According to Gartner, no surprise, the highest business priority for general managers and CEOs is technology and harnessing tech with AI. But there is still a lot of fear and a lot of governance to wade through, particularly in government organisations. I love this graph. I use it quite a lot because what it says and where we are is at the moment in the trough of disillusionment. This is now, but we will soon be through that as we progress through the next 12 months. So the trough of disillusionment is where we've got data issues, people not believing the data, uncertainty about best practice. We've got skill gaps. People don't actually still, lots of organisations know how to use AI effectively. And they've got change fatigue. Oh, God, AI, this, that, and the other. And all of this is giving this disillusionment. But Deloitte believes that AI will impact 16% of tasks immediately. This chart suggests 22% to 25% in the next 12 months. Now, tasks such as report drafting, triage in terms of customers and the community, documents, knowledge retrieval, routine analysis, data analysis, bookkeeping, any of those repetitive administrative tasks are all susceptible now to automation. And these repetitive tasks are in everybody's role. even GMs. They're in everybody's role. And as the AI-enhanced technology comes along, we'll get that enlightenment, and it's going to do more and more as it goes through. This is the federal government, the Commonwealth government, 5,800 public servants. Took the 6-month Microsoft Copilot trial. Now, it's a year old, this information. It reported 1 to 2 hours per day of people augmented with Copilot being trained effectively to use it. So round about 20 to 25% of their roles, what they were doing, augmented by technology, was the time that they saved. By this assumption, we're saying that everyone's job could only be 75% of their time. That gives you a spare 25% in all of these jobs that people have. And this is where we're going to have to start flattening and changing the structure or that hierarchy to clusters and to teams in order to utilize that spare resource that we've got. And everyone's role needs to change, not just a select few. So as we start to look at what tasks can be taken over by technology, there is a greater focus going to be on what tasks people do. And now this project, as I said, was 12 months old. Since then, there have been many different trials. And I know that there's a number of trials in council, and you might want to write that in. There's definitely an AI-assisted planning trial that's going on at the moment. There are definitely triaging customer experience that are going, but they seem to be trials in certain areas that people experience. And I'd love to see what kind of results. It may well be that we're still in that trough of disillusionment with some of the trials that we are doing. So what does doing more with less really mean to the people on the ground? Well, more with less in the notorious traditional areas is hiring freezes, restructures. I've got one client that's restructured 3 times in 2 years. There's job cuts. I know that doesn't necessarily ring true. This is different organisations. But these strategies lead to reductions in engagement. They lead to reductions in productivity as well as burnout, and an increase in those that are left behind taking on extra roles. These 3 strategies just cut costs in the near term, but they do not necessarily lead to improved outcomes, and they don't lead to improved outcomes augmented by the technology. What we need to do is redesign the work, clarify the new roles in the new order, and they're not jobs, they're roles or skill-based value that people provide in teams. We've got to redesign the decision-making. That's the critical success factor, is who makes the decisions and are they skilled to do that? And we need to uplift everyone's capability to be able to do that. We actually need to redesign the organisation. Efficiency will come from redesigning the work, not necessarily reducing the people that we come through. Now, here's just a quick little chart. This is a Gartner chart. And what it shows is employees aren't getting value from the AI augmentation now. But with great training and adoption, plus redesigning your workflow, we can start to create new ways of working. And that, along with some great change management, will shift people's expectations of what work they will be doing and the skills they will need to work in the teams that they will be in. So this is the shift. We've got to augment people, re-engineer the workflow, and then reinvent the ways of working. And that's kind of the process of how you add technology going through. Here are all of the benefits. This is a Deloitte report on skill-based organisations. When we move to these kind of structures, they drive loyalty, engagement, retention, innovation, diversity, inclusion. There are so many measures, so many benefits. It's about the top right, which is the fluid-based teams. Simply put, the organisation which is structured around what work needs to be done and what skills are required, inclusive of technology, will be the organisation that is able to function effectively and efficiently. There's a great HBR, Harvard Business Review podcast that was out in the last month of a gentleman talking about moving to these fluid-based teams. And he's, presented it as if it was easy. But the fact is, all of these organisations that I'm quoting, Josh Bersin, Deloitte's, Gartner's, underestimate the effort and the energy that is required to make this monumental shift. And for government, and particularly local government, the shift from a hierarchy to a fluid, agile organisation structure is even more problematic than in a corporate environment, because councils operate within structural constraints that private organisations just simply don't face. You've got the Local Government Act, so you need the general manager structure, you need clear delegation of authority, you need formal reporting lines and audit and governance. So all of this is required, which actually is a compliance-driven and makes it a closed system. Unfortunately, what we have to do is loosen that closed system, and there is great change that can happen within that system to open it up and make it more fluid. They also, councils particularly, are structured within awards. Roles are defined, pay bands, you've got multi-skilling has implications from an industrial perspective. So these are kind of the, constraints. But rapid role design can occur with consultation. We can change roles and we can align them with industrial frameworks. And it's been done in a number of, it's done in some councils. Mostly the examples I found are actually in New Zealand. And it definitely has been done in government and state government. Now, I'm going to backtrack just for one thing. 2 in our agenda was talking about leadership capability and org design as being critical. And a critical success factor in good org design and in change in a council context is this dynamic leadership that says, yes, this can be done. This is one of my 4 tips later with dynamic and adaptable leadership. That is that juxtaposition to be able to take people on the journey from the hierarchy or within the hierarchy to this fluid-based organisational structure. So just let me summarise before I jump to tips. Yes, that's the org design. It talks about cross-functional project teams, which in local government you can have within the governance frameworks. There's skill-based deployment inside the industrial settings. You just need to do the consultation. And you can have dynamic leadership behaviours that enable both the adaptability and the innovation and the psych safety that organisations need for people to work within those confines. And as I said, there's some good examples, which is New South Wales Government has flexible work reforms that they're going through. Service New South Wales is cross-functional delivery model. It's done. It can be done within these environments or that closed environment. Here's an example from Auckland Council, or one of the network structure that works alongside Auckland Council. It's called a dual operating system, and it has a network structure that works for infrastructure, community building, asset utilisation and procurement. And so they've taken certain parts of the council structure, put them into network structure, demonstrated that it works, and that is within the confines of their hierarchical structure, which is looking still at workflow analysis. They are doing quite a lot of skill building. They're doing a skill taxonomy. They're looking at the new way of working. And that's probably one of the nicest diagrams I've seen of how it can work together when you take specific functional areas and put them into a networked structure. So can be done. So how prepared do you feel your council is for the skills-based future? Have a think. Thank you so much for your contributions. It gives me an opportunity to have a glass of water. Okay. There's a few still unsure, and that is fine. I'll put it, we've got mostly somewhat prepared or not prepared at all. And that's one of the key pieces of knowledge. The tips that we are going to look at, have I shared the results? There we go. So you can see somewhat prepared, 30% or thereabouts not prepared at all. These 5 tips will give you a guidance or guidelines for how you can be better prepared for moving forward. So 5 tips that can make the difference. Okay. Here they are. I'll take you through them one at a time, and they can really change the momentum of how you're heading down this path. First of all, we're talking about this work design, and we've got to align that to strategy. That's that organizational design, which is looking at the process, the structure, the technology. Let's redesign the work. Map your current flows across functions. And when we do it across functions, we can identify duplication, we can look at bottlenecks, we can look at unnecessary approvals that are happening. And there's a book summary that I was reading from Maya Shankar, and the book is called The Other Side of Change, and it talks a lot about change fatigue. And it's said that offers the deepest suffering doesn't come from the disruption itself, the work change or any of those, but it actually comes from the shift from a repeatable and controllable job to a fluid and less controllable workflow. And that's the greatest identity that people have, particularly your older generations. They still identify themselves by their job. They usually don't say, oh, I'm a project person in a customer service team. They want to say I'm a customer service officer or I'm a customer service manager. That brings, the word manager brings prestige. In these more fluid organisations, these job titles change, and that seems to be one of the greatest losses when we're looking at work design. So part of the shift from jobs to teams-based or project-based roles is the loss of some of these titles. Great areas to start are, as I mentioned earlier, corporate support, there's customer service, there's capital works, infrastructure. Those are great places to start this sort of movement. Redesign also needs to be linked to strategy. What are we trying to achieve? What's in the 5-year plan that every single council has? What are you going to be measured on? And make sure that this alignment takes those strategic pillars and works on those first. Design around the end-to-end value and the delivery, not the departments that you've got. So you do have to, number one, do the work design and do a huge communication process that goes with it. You need the leadership capability, but it's got to be infrastructure. I call it infrastructure in organisation. A leader's capability to make decisions at the right level, reduce the escalation and reduce the over-control. It's a huge shift for many councils where escalations are rife and that site safety isn't necessarily there for people to even feel like they can make some of the decisions. Everyone needs the skills and understanding to make the decisions for the skills and that fluid team-based environment to work. And critical for success is this collaboration cross-functionally. It shouldn't be optional. It's got to be an expectation. Silos still exist in many councils and they reduce the ability to reap this cross-functional reward or value that you're going to get from adding technology. Dynamic leadership is actually about equipping leadership to adapt to this speed, ambiguity, prioritise rigorously and optimising the system that you're in. Not just about that sort of leadership is not just about supervising technical expertise or the people doing technical things. It's actually adaptable and dynamic leadership that drives the change in the organisation. Now, leadership capability in the new council is actually for everyone too. We've got to democratise leadership and reduce the power of the hierarchy, unfortunately. This is leadership for everyone. Self-managed teams where leadership is shared for each having a leadership role to play. In agile environments, everyone needs to demonstrate self-leadership skills. That's the ability to work autonomously, be accountable, make decisions, deliver their outcomes. Surprisingly, dynamic leadership for our Ys and Zs and our Zillennials is a little easier. And they are really good at coaching some of our older workers to adapt to the technology. Now, we used to call it reverse mentoring, but actually that's not a good term to use because it insinuates that the hierarchy still exists, and that's why we're reversing it. So if we take away the word reverse mentoring and just have these fluid teams where everyone has some equality for whatever the process is, then we can sort of democratize this leadership. In reality, there will always be general managers. There will always be senior leaders that set direction and manage the huge amount of stakeholders that council have. And a lot of people's roles at senior levels is about managing stakeholders. That will still exist. But the rest of council needs to step up and engage more and be allowed to make decisions at their level within the governance, at their level of expertise. Number 3, this is just a little bit about what makes dynamic leadership different. I wasn't going to focus a great deal on that. Again, we have a whole webinar on dynamic leadership. One of the key things here is that dynamic leaders are not controllers. They are influencers. And that's a key shift. They don't control or manage or do any of those sorts of things. They influence others. And they influence really well when they don't necessarily have the authority to do it. Great skill to have. Tip 3 is all about the team-based skills, and team-based skills needs to be your culture. There's a concept called T-shaped capability building, which is about deep expertise in one professional area. That's the vertical part of the T, but then also broad capability across a number of other disciplines. So you might have somebody that is a planner that has statutory planning expertise, legislative knowledge, the capability to assess, but they could also have much broader understanding about engineering, maybe stakeholders that are involved, maybe working with digital systems that are involved, collaborating with the project teams. There's a whole range of other skills that they can have, which broadens their deep or depth of experience. Ultimately, what that will do is if we've got these T or broader skilled people, is they'll be able to make faster decisions, they'll do less rework, and they'll have better cross-team outcomes. So we need to start developing people across the breadth of the skills that you need. That's that skill-based organisation. But we're not talking about people becoming generalists. We're asking specialists just to collaborate more effectively across the system and be more broad-minded, to think outside of their level of expertise. And that is about what value can they add. And most people have more value to add than just their specific level of expertise. Skill-based organisations see skills as a key organisational pillar of their culture, not just a job role. So my tip here, without a receptive culture, also meaning receptive leadership, for the team-based skills, is that you're going to struggle. And the tip, then we have to go back to tip 2, which is that leadership is infrastructure to be able to coach the change. So dynamic leaders are able to coach people to shift and change to these team-based skills. So that's 3. 4, standard change management applies. It's a phased approach. Pilot first. Select a high-impact cross-functional team, whether it's capital works, customer facing, or that customer experience. Even HR is a great place to start this sort of a process. Use them as the pilot, test the new team structure and the established decision rights in that contained environment. And then you have a work in progress or a measured work in progress, which you can scale. And it's about the impact on the staff engagement and whether it's community expectations or satisfaction, whatever it is you're measuring in that process, measure the impact, demonstrate that it works, and then you're ready to scale. So start small, quick wins, grow from there. And that's the way you demonstrate value in the new ways of working, like a ripple effect. Your organisation design can then expand. And look, finally, change management, as I mentioned right up front in terms of the work health and safety, if we do not do effective change management, we may well be creating a hazard or a risk in our organisation. So engage staff early, explain to them the why. Some of these dynamic leaders can coach in this area, explain the why before you introduce the structural shifts. You may well need to employ or involve the employees in the redesign to reduce resistance, reinforcing new behaviours with communications, leadership modelling, and clear governance. That gives something that people can understand in terms of what are the guardrails or the scaffolds that they need to work within. So without change management, your organisation won't change. And I actually mean true change management, not project management, which is the process trumped up as change management. Change management is about people. Now, we believe in open source change management, which is employee or team member led. But that needs to be facilitated. And I actually think, I'm going to make a bit of a judgment, is that good change management actually requires to be external from the environment. Now, that's either external facilitation or a specific change manager that's not necessarily involved in that team or that part of the organisation. Because what that does is that brings objectivity and it removes some of the barriers. And I'll give you an example. I'm actually on the board of a not-for-profit. Now, not-for-profits notoriously are nice people because they're purpose-led. Now, councils have some similarities here in that they are purpose-led, and a lot of people that work for councils are from the community. So they're purpose-led and they're actually quite nice. So in this particular not-for-profit, they are doing an organisation redesign, and they need to do that because they had no technology whatsoever. And so they're trying to automate parts of that, what a reasonably sized organisation. Now, last week at board, they reported that there were not many changes to their workflows. There were not many changes to the job roles, and there were not many changes at all after 3 months of consultation. Now, having worked in change management for a little over 30 years, I know that this is the perfect example of parochial resistance to change that is delivered by an internal change manager. Nobody wants to change their roles. They're happy and they are as they are. And they're also, their internal change manager doesn't necessarily want to challenge their thinking. And herein lies my final tip. This will require courage because the resistance from people will be high. This is a huge change, and the speed at which it's coming is actually going to be substantial. And that said, that's why dynamic leadership and that the dynamic leaders that can coach and they can offer an opportunity and hope in these new structures will prevail. And hope is one of the greatest things that humans have and are able to share with others, is that the hope that the future will be a great opportunity to move forward to. So I'm conscious of, I've only got 3 minutes left, happy to answer any questions if they are there. Really, look, you're at the crossroads. A number of you have given me some good examples of why, in terms of the older workforce compliance, all of those sorts of things are there. You really need to look at your leadership capability and look at the holistic aspect of organisational design, systems, structures, and people and resources. And that might be capital resources that are in there as well. It's the whole workflow that you need to look at. It's about doing more with less, which is about augmenting your people in a really effective way with technology and setting them up for success that we go through. And then it's about our 5 tips, which is about work design, dynamic leadership, team-based as culture. And that leadership, I call that infrastructure. I call it another piece of infrastructure is good dynamic leadership. A phased approach, pilot first, and really prioritise your change management. So that brings us to the end. Thank you so much. If there are any questions, happy to answer them. Look, also, we've got a webinar which is more general, which is about accountability. Karen's put a link in there if you want to register for that. That's accountability in teams, because that seems to be something But a number of people have asked us about how do we hold each other accountable when we are on equal footing with one another. And so it's how do we ensure that that accountability is also aligned to the organisation. So we have that going through. And then that's just a little more about us. If you have some feedback for us, we would appreciate it. Let us know if there's any further topics that you would like, and happy to help. Thank you so much, and see ya.